ChatGPT knows the research, Notion holds the project, Gmail has the conversation, and 3 separate companies control the places where all of that information lives. Odysseus offers a very different idea. Keep the workspace under your control and ownership, choose the models yourself, and bring the email, research, notes, tasks, and documents into one system. That sounds excellent in theory, but control is worthless when the workflow is slower, weaker, or constantly breaking. Now, the claim of this video is not that Odysseus can rebuild Gmail servers or make a local model smarter than GPT 5.6. The real question is whether it can replace the 3 interfaces that you constantly jump between and keep the entire workflow in one place. By the end of this video, you will know exactly what Odysseus can genuinely replace, where the dedicated applications are still clearly better, the complete setup, and whether putting everything inside one dashboard actually saves your work and time. Alright, so starting with what replacing actually means, because before we touch the setup, we need the correct definition of replacement. Odysseus is not an AI model, it's the workspace around the model. You can connect a powerful cloud model through an API, run a smaller local model through something like Olama, or switch between different providers depending on the task. Odysseus then gives those models access to chat, files, tools, research, documents, and so many different features and tools within the workspace. So when I say it can maybe replace ChatGPT, I am not asking whether Odysseus somehow invents its own frontier level intelligence. I'm simply testing whether it can replace the ChatGPT interface that I use for conversations, files, research, project context, and writing. The same thing applies for Notion. When I say it can replace it, I'm not saying it has the same database engine, team collaboration, formulas, and so on. I'm asking whether its documents, notes, tasks, etc. are enough to run a realistic solo content workflow. Odysseus does not need to rebuild every service underneath, but it needs to reduce how often I leave one workspace to finish a job. Alright, so for the workflow setup, you need about 4 components. The first one is of course Odysseus as the central workspace. Second, we need a strong cloud or local model through an API for the difficult research, reasoning, and writing. I will deliberately not be using a small local model for the main comparison because that would test model intelligence rather than the quality of the Odysseus workspace. Asking a lightweight model to compete with GPT 5.6 and then blaming Odysseus when it struggles would be a completely rigged test. And then we need web search, as Odysseus bundles its search stack with the Docker setup. So once those services are running, Deep Research can search and read sources without me opening a separate research application or doing it myself. Finally, the dedicated Gmail demonstration account connected through IMAP and SMTP. And that is the complete stack. A capable model provides the intelligence, and the rest of the tools can replace Notion and Gmail. Now, I know that you can connect Notion to Odysseus through MCP depending on the version and configuration you are running. But I'm not going to be connecting Notion for this video. The entire question is whether Odysseus can remove the need for a separate Notion workspace, not whether it can place an AI layer on top of the Notion system I already use. Keeping the stack native also makes it leaner. There's no extra workspace to maintain, no duplicated nodes or conflicting versions of the same project, and no additional permissions or external connections sitting between the model and my work. I'm saying that because connecting Notion through MCP is the better route for you when Notion is already the backbone of your business. Now let's go ahead and talk about the ChatGPT replacement. I created a realistic video project around the topic of best AI coding agents in 2026. Inside the project folder, I will have my channel writing guidelines, a CSV containing several coding tools and sample pricing, some competitors information, a product announcement PDF, viewer comments. I will upload everything into Odysseus and begin with one instruction. This matters because the project is not starting from one isolated prompt inside a blank chat. The model that I use can see the reference material, understand the channel style, recognize the objective, and so on. The result gives me the initial angle, the important comparison categories, and the claims that need more research and a proper foundation for the video. This is definitely useful so far, but it's not perfect. Some information that I have, which you also may have, such as the pricing points, will still need to be verified against the official source. Once you have these details, you can send the project into Deep Research. The research process searches across multiple sources, reads the relevant material, and builds a structured report that I can continue using inside the same project. Now, this is exactly the type of job I would normally open ChatGPT for. This would be a great chance for us to use one of Odysseus's biggest differentiators, which is the compare mode. I send the same question to 3 different models, and if I want to, including GPT 5.6. The answers will appear side by side across all different models, and then I can evaluate which model produces the strongest framework without moving the project into 3 different products. ChatGPT lets you choose between different GPT models, the older ones versus the new ones, but it doesn't give you a standalone feature like this one where you can compare the answers of all different models in one space. But Odysseus gives me a super clean, model-neutral workspace where multiple models can answer the same task together in real time. Of course, this can be any model that you want, not necessarily the OpenAI models only. You can choose any different models that you want. For example, one of the DeepSeeks versus GPT versus Claude Fable 5 and so on. Now, the great thing about this is that if you genuinely prefer the ChatGPT responses on the chatbot, then you can actually use a GPT model through the API key. OpenRouter gives you access to so many different models that you can use at the same time, as you can see on my screen right here. So the point is you can replace the OpenAI subscription and the ChatGPT interface, but still retain the quality of the GPT responses through an API cloud model, or if you get a local one, but the quality is not going to be exactly the same. So that is pretty much the honest ChatGPT comparison for this angle. At the intelligence level, Odysseus is only as good as the model I connect, but what it may replace is the interface around that intelligence. You will still get the chatbot interface similar to this one, the files, research, project context, and writing environment, and most importantly, all of the information and the files will remain on your own machine completely privately if you are running a local model. So for example, if something goes wrong with OpenAI tomorrow and they have to shut down their servers, you will lose access to everything, your chats, your projects, the files on ChatGPT, literally everything. But in the case of Odysseus, it's a workspace that you fully run on your own machine and you own every bit of it. So with that said, here is where ChatGPT still wins. It is more polished, easier to use, requires almost no setup, and offers a much stronger consumer experience across mobile, voice, images, connected applications, and general convenience. But for text-heavy work, source research, file analysis, and switching between different models without moving the project, Odysseus covers a very large portion of what I personally open ChatGPT for. So I would say it is a very strong replacement for text, research, files, and multi-model work. It's not a replacement for OpenAI's intelligence itself, and not the easier option for a complete beginner. Alright, so with the ChatGPT test out of the way, let's go ahead and discuss whether it can actually replace Notion. At this point, you should have your research done with Odysseus and the model that you have selected, and now it's time to turn it into an actual production system. You would have to go to Odysseus chat interface, switch it to the agent mode, and then give it an instruction similar to this one. So just like that, the research is no longer trapped inside a conversation. You should now have a master project document supporting research notes, a production checklist, individual tasks, priorities, deadlines, and calendar entries. All of that sits beside the same model and source material that created it. Of course, this is where the unified workspace idea starts to become genuinely useful. In a normal workflow, I would research inside ChatGPT, copy the useful parts into Notion, restructure the information into a project, manually creating the tasks, and then add the important dates somewhere else. Inside Odysseus, the research, writing, organization, and execution are at least happening within the same environment and tab. The biggest value is not flawless automation, the value is avoiding the constant movement between disconnected applications. If you are a solo creator, this is huge. I noticed that a lot of personal Notion systems are really just research notes, draft documents, a content backlog, a few deadlines here and there, and somewhere to store decisions. In that case, Odysseus can definitely handle that and some more. But of course, having notes does not mean Notion is suddenly useless. I'm not saying that. Notion still operates at a much deeper level when the workflow depends on relational databases, filtered views, formulas, advanced properties, database automations, team permissions, and more. Odysseus can manage a simple personal production system. Notion, on the other hand, can build the operational database for an entire company. So in terms of Notion replacement, it is a good replacement for simple solo documents, notes, tasks, and deadlines. But it is not a full replacement for advanced databases, collaboration, or complex automation. If you still want to use Notion in conjunction with Odysseus, then I recommend going the MCP route. Alright, so finally we've got the Gmail integration. So for this email test, I'm going to be loading 6 realistic messages into the dedicated demonstration inbox. And then I will ask Odysseus to review the unread messages and organize them into urgent, important, informational, and low priority. This is the full prompt for this. Now for that to work, you're going to need to have your email connected through IMAP and SMTP if you also want sending. And realistically, if you want to eliminate as much time as possible from using Gmail itself, then you want to connect both. If you want the exact steps and procedure to connecting and using your email inside Odysseus in more detail, you will find some related videos below the video for your convenience. But for the time being, I'm going to skip that setup because I've covered it in many different videos, and we'll go straight to the actual process. Here is the response that Odysseus gave me for that prompt. Now, the way I personally use this is that I let it summarize, classify, extract, and draft. But I always keep a human hand on anything that sends, deletes, archives, or makes an important commitment. The requests become tasks, the deadline becomes visible. The reply is drafted besides the project instead of remaining buried inside the inbox. And that is the part that Gmail alone does not solve for any workflow. It is still doing all of the invisible infrastructure underneath, receiving and delivering messages, filtering spam, and all of that stuff. Odysseus cannot replace any of that. It is providing an alternative interface over the mailbox, one that connects the message to the rest of the project. So if we are replacing Gmail as an interface, not a service, then Odysseus is very useful for that. You can directly use it as a replacement for inbox triage, summaries, action extraction, and reply drafting. Alright, so as a demonstration of putting everything together, here is how I would take one collaboration inquiry and then treat it as the beginning of a new video project. It all starts in the email that contains a basic request from a software company asking whether I would consider covering its product. I give Odysseus one master instruction. One email goes in. From it, Odysseus creates a summary of the request, a list of missing information, a project note, a production task list, and so on. Now, part of this structure still requires a small manual nudge into the correct task module. It doesn't wire every component together like some perfect autonomous operating system, but everything is created inside the same workspace from the same source with the same context. In my opinion, this is one of the strongest cases that Odysseus makes. ChatGPT can perform the research, Notion can store and organize the project, Gmail can hold the original conversation. Each dedicated product may perform its individual job with more polish, but in my normal setup, that chain crosses 3 different interfaces and requires me to carry the context between them. But in Odysseus' case, the chain is the product. The advantage is not that its task list is more powerful than Notion's, the advantage is that the task list already understands the email, the research, the project, and the model that created it. Now, to give you at a glance what Odysseus can and can't replace in terms of these tools, take a look at these pictures right here. So when it comes to ChatGPT, it can definitely replace the text chat, file analysis, deep research, writing, project context, and the multi-model comparison. Some of the features here cannot be done by ChatGPT altogether. However, if you want the zero setup, product polish, voice, images, mobile, and native integrations, then ChatGPT remains much better at those. As for Notion, as I mentioned earlier, it can replace the personal documents, research notes, basic project organization, tasks, deadlines, and more. But Notion remains undefeated at the relational databases, multiple advanced views, formulas, automations, collaboration, permissions, and the team knowledge management. Now, of course, when it comes to Gmail, we're not going to be replacing that. We need an email provider, whether it's Gmail, Outlook, whatever you use. We just use the simple integration within Odysseus and then access the email through it. So that will be all on today's video. Thank you so much for watching. For a solo creator with a relatively simple organization system, the documents, notes, tasks, deadlines, and more can be more than enough to replace working through Notion, Gmail, and ChatGPT, and instead leveraging all of the features that Odysseus gives you under one workspace. If you have found this video to be helpful or informative to watch, let me know by giving it a thumbs up. And make sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel so you keep up with all of the future content that we make relevant to this one.